next item, I know some people have been sitting waiting patiently for the discussion of the betterments. I will be recusing myself from this discussion, and I will turn the chairmanship over to Mr. Cruz. Mr. Sanjanet.
She's handed me the gavel, so I hope I don't have to use it. Thank you.
I'll try to be good. I prepared a sheet for the board to review. The board has two options, as was stated by the resident earlier this morning or this evening. One is to set how the betterments will be assessed, and the second is how to split the stimulus money. And in front of you, you have basically my analysis of the current situation with the betterments. If you leave the betterments separate, no change, contract 1 would pay $15,337, and contract 2 would pay $22,051. You can leave the betterments separate and reduce contract 2 by the approximate cost of moving, or the cost of moving the pump stations, and just keep them separate and have all the users pick up those costs outside of the betterment. In that instance, contract 1 would still pay $15,337, and contract 2 would drop to about $21,000.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Where would that $100,000 come from?
It would be part of the EDU rate. All the users would have to pick up that cost.
Okay. And there's no other funding to use for that $100,000? Okay. So we would spread that $100,000 across the entire sewer system. Has that ever been done before?
You can do it. You can take costs out of the project, but if for something similar to this, I couldn't tell you if that's been done
Mr.
before.
Chairman?
Certainly not in Wareham.
I would say, Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify for...
Yes.
No, I wanted to answer Selectman Winslow's question. Insofar as it not, whether it's been done or not, there was actually going under Wewianick to go over to Rose Point, and there was some concerns of whether the entire town or the entire sewer user rate should pick up going under. And it was voted that it has to go under there to get to them, and it went on to the Rose Point sewer rate. So we've actually, there has been an affirmative vote in the opposite way. I'm sorry.
Not spreading the okay. That was my question. Thank you.
And the third is combining contracts 1 and 2. In talking to the attorney, though, from what I understand, if the Selectmen or the Board of Sewer Commissioners chose to do this, you would take only 50% of the estimated costs of each project and create an estimated betterment which would be assessed, and then when both projects are final, you would adjust those numbers. Based on my crude calculations, because I really couldn't, it's my opinion that the final betterment cost would be approximately $17,000 with all the costs finalized.
So when you said 17,000, you're saying just for contract 1 and 2?
If we combine contract 1 and 2.
And we're not even talking about contract 3 on this at this point?
No, I'm not. Not at this point.
Now, at one time, you did have something combining all 3 at one of the...
Correct.
So is that still a possibility?
It is still a possibility, but the contract would have to be bidded relatively shortly. It'd have to go out to bid before contract 1 was complete.
So if that's a possibility, is there any way where we can put out that for bid now, contract 3?
That, I'm not sure where CDM sits with the final design stage. Maybe Mr. Gifford can answer that.
I know it's very close to being designed, but there are a couple of factors that we're not sure of yet, and that's the location of the pump station. And I really don't want to see us go out to bid with this contract until we know exactly where those pump stations are going, so we're not moving them from point A to point B. There are a couple of factors that have to be worked out before. I would recommend that we go out to bid for that contract.
You would recommend that we do what now?
We do not until we know exactly where the pump stations are going, and I know there's a couple of areas that are up in the air right now.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you. John, where are we at in terms of the timeline on Project One?
Contract 1, I believe they're going to be finished before the end of the fiscal year.
But that's 97.4% complete.
Time frame? What does that mean, July, December, what?
I'd say within a month you'll be able to start tying in.
Within a month, Mark?
Correct.
Yeah, I thought CDM said that, like they were gonna get whatever, the binder coat or something down by, it was on schedule like for the end of November or by November or something, whatever it is that they.
Yeah, the paving has been completed. They're doing a lot of cleanup. It's just a matter of the startup of the pump stations and the testing.
Yeah, or maybe that's what it was. Thank
All
you.
right, so if I may, back to my question. So let's say they're completed by November 31st, give or take. And then, when do you assess when you get your final numbers? John, you said it takes about 6 months?
About 6 months after the,
So now we're talking about May. You would assess, or we would assess the number. And then when do folks have to stop paying?
it has to be attached to a final bill, so it would go out in January.
30 days after you give notice?
After we assess the final bill, it would be attached to a final tax bill, which the final tax bills go out in January, so it would be May, and then we'd have about a 7-month delay before the betterments were assessed.
So we go out in January 12th, right?
Yes.
Now, if you just focus on Project 2 for a second, what's the estimated completion date?
I believe at the last meeting, it was about a third complete, so we're looking at it, 2/3 left to go. They have not started in the Oakdale area as of yet, and they probably won't start there until the middle of October. So you're looking at certainly delay over the winter months unless they have favorable weather, and the pump stations would still need to be installed for that project. So you're looking probably the end of next summer, maybe
The end of
later.
next
About the
summer.
same time frame, maybe, with delays, and they would start receiving their betterments in January 2013.
Correct. Depending on how quickly all the bills get submitted.
Because then you have the same delay.
Yes.
Right, the same process.
And there's about a 30-day delay in preparing the betterments.
Now, when the contracts are finished and you assess the betterments, is there a time limit and a set dollar rate? In other words, once you set it, suppose we were to combine the two. You give us betterment now, and then a year and a half from now, you go over the figures and something changes. It's either high or low. Has that been done, or is it possible?
Well, I believe the estimated betterment, if you combine both contracts, you give an estimated betterment.
Right.
That would be for only approximately 50%.
50% of both projects. And then once the projects were completed and all the bills are paid, we'd have final numbers and we'd be able to adjust a final betterment, be able to assess a final betterment on these properties. And it would be adjusted based on the estimated betterment.
Well, I want to bring this out because I have one problem. When we have a contract for Contract 3, when we went to the state, we borrowed money on all 3 contracts, correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay. Now we borrowed X amount of money. And it's supposed to be for 3 contracts if we want, like as Chet said, to make everything equal to everybody. We have 860 residents in Contract 3 total. And if we had 3 contracts, how would we do it if you want to be equitable to everybody? 860. You divide it by 3, come up with 260 some odd, or whatever it is. But on this one project, and if we want to be fair to everyone, this one project, you have over 400 people on this one contract. So you're dividing that thing to more people than you have on the end. I'm looking out after the homeowners that aren't here. Someone's going to have to pay $37,000 or whatever. Now, it could have been divided up where everyone would have had at least, we could have had 260 or 70 on each contract except for Parkwood. Parkwood has 333. But Parkwood was lumped with another one which brought it up to 450. So is that being equitable to everybody when Parkwood could have been a standalone project?
I know what you're asking, Mr. Cruz. I can't answer that question because the engineers,
If I may, the Board of Selectmen from 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I think it was 5 years ago, sat down and tried to come up with the areas that were closest together, the amounts of houses that were closest together, regardless of where Parkwood landed, because of the density of people in Parkwood. You had to do Parkwood at the same time that you did Tempest Knob, I believe, because you had to connect them together. I think that was the two of them that pretty much had to go together.
Excuse me. All these projects are standalone projects. You do not have to lump them together. You could have done Tempest because
okay.
there's a cutoff point. So
I understand
I
that.
want to put that to rest anyway.
Okay. I understand that, but it was at the request of CDM that we put these together because you could do them as all standalone projects. You're absolutely right. But the cost that you would have had to pay for each one of those individual projects to be done would have probably been twice the cost if you had put 3 of them together and then divided it by 3.
Well,
And the reason why was because that was at CDM's recommendation that you don't want to go to too big a project because if you do, there's only 3 or 4 in the entire state that would bid on it. And you don't want to go to the small, to one project at a time because at a certain level, the value of the project is at a rate that you're just getting either everyone to bid on it or they have so much equipment and everything they have to bring down that it doesn't make it cost effective for them to do it.
Well, even if you broke up the contracts, you say if you put them all together, only the large contractors can bid on it. When you separate it out, it's the same difference. Because if a small contractor has a bid allowance of so much money, once he bids on that one, he can't bid on the other 2 anyways, because we're doing them one right after the other. Now, I don't know what the reason why we're waiting so long for contract 3, but if we've been doing this since the project, we should have had it already all up on the books.
If I may, did not Gioso bid on and get both contract 2 and 3? So I think, I'm sorry, 1 and 2. So you can bid on things, and actually, I believe that with Gioso, timing-wise or whatever, it was that they did that because then they don't have to pull back out. And as far as what the decision was, I can only tell you that back then, it was at the recommendation from our engineers to try to get these projects in this price range. And that, the quantity, the size, or whatever. Each one of these things are going to have a different, different qualities of the environment, different land issues. Rose Point, the people over there, their waterway, their roads, some of them are under the water table, and they had some severe issues. And unfortunately, for living there, those are some of the things that they have to pay for. I think that I understand, Mr. Cruz, the idea of, saying that it's trying to be fair, but what I think is the most fair is that we have, through 5 or 6 or 7 projects already, what we've done is we have taken each project, and this isn't the first time that we've had 2 or 3 very close together. We had Briarwood and Beaver Dam, we had Wee Weenick, and we had Rose Point. And they were 3 separate projects, and they were almost done right on top of each other. And they were all kept separate. It's an innately unfair system. And I think to try to change the way it is now you are making an unfair system that we're trying to be fair on piece by piece, that you're making an unfair system even more unfair.
Well, we have engineers, we have estimators. Contract 3 is already estimated at a certain price because they have a $37,000 betterment. So if they could have done it they could have done it the same way.
Well-
Divide it, yes, they could. There's a way you can do it that everybody be equal. In other words, Parkwood is 333 people. That could have been a standalone project. You could have 260 on one area and 267, dividing the money up.
And I
Now
understand.
you have one Agawam, or whatever the other one is. You have Agawam and Mayflower Ridge. One has 106, one has 47. That's only 150. That's got to pay that betterment for a project that's going to cost more money, and you know that in the beginning. So if it's going to cost more money, the more people you have in it to divide the cost is going to be less, where the way we have it now, you got 400, 430 on one contract
But
compared to 260?
But if I may, I also think that you cannot say that the fairness is that they all have to pay the same, because I would venture to guess that the value of a home in Parkwood is nowhere near the value of a home maybe at Agawam Beach or Mayflower Ridge. You're talking 2,500 to 5,000 square foot lots in Parkwood Beach, because it's the same type of neighborhood that I live in.
Parkwood Beach is a...
Excuse me.
Excuse me, I'm going to... Point of order.
Excuse
Because now we...
Excuse me. I have the floor. Mr. Chairman, I have the floor.
Okay, make it
Thank
quick
you.
then. Go ahead. Thank you.
Now,
ahead.
it's the same type of neighborhood that I live in. There's 2,500 to 5,000 square foot lots. Those lots, those houses, many of them were seasonal homes that were converted. These houses are not big. They're types of houses that either people came, they were summer houses and they downsized, or such as my family, that it was what we could afford. It was a smaller house, but it was what we could afford at the time. And so I don't think to compare those to million-dollar homes and to say, if we do it this way, a $15,000 betterment, it's on a $300,000 house, it's a 5% value. If you have $1 million house and you're putting a $40,000 betterment, it's less than 3% of the value of the house, right? So if you're looking at it, as far as the fairness and equity, these people, wherever they lived, they chose to live there, whether it was because that was what they could afford, or because they chose to have longer frontage so they had less neighbors. And if that's what they choose, then there has to be some value to that. Before this last upgrade, the old ones, they did it by frontage. And I know that there are some people who have smaller frontages that want to go back to that. But the issue is that at what point is, just because my lot's sideways, and it's 100-foot frontage and yours is 50-foot frontage, should I pay twice as much? It's still both a sewer. But if you are paying for that, essentially the luxury of having 300 feet with no neighbors beside you, then there is a cost to that, and should be a cost to that all the way around.
On
That's
the
what I'm
frontage,
saying.
whether you go to frontage or the property value, Parkwood Beaches value more than, we'll say, I don't know where all these, maybe they have more frontage, but their value of the property and the house is not as much as it is in Parkwood Beach. You can get more in Parkwood Beach. The idea is we can have 860 residents, and we're going to divide the contract that we got from the state equally. Whether you live in a $500,000 house or a $250,000 house. We got 800. We're in the town of Wareham. We're trying to, everybody's going to be treated equal and fair. So we have 860. Divide that by the contract amount and divide that by 3, and everybody be charged the same.
That-
Parkwood is still going to come out ahead because they have 33 units compared
No.
to everybody else's.
Parkwood will not come out
60.
ahead.
Chair, just ask you a question. Has this been done before in the town of Wareham, where you took the contracts and combined them? when they did Rose Point and they did other areas?
Well, I don't know how those contracts were taken from the state or how they were bid it out.
State.
Were they taken from the state, a lump sum, all at one to do it?
I don't know,
See, we don't know.
I wasn't here when they
And
did it.
there has been changes in the contract, the way it's been done since day one. People say we can't change, they change it from frontage, and they, they've changed two or three of them different ways. One was by lineal footage, that was Sunset Island. So it's not saying that you can't change.
Right. Those were all before the Comprehensive Wastewater Management
What-
Plan of 2002.
What I like to do is make it equitable for everybody. If we're going to do a sewer treatment in the town of Wareham, we need everybody to be treated the same.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes, are you done?
No, go ahead.
I think that when I look at these numbers, and we have the $15,333.14 betterment, estimated betterment for contract one, and $22,051 betterment on contract two. The difference between those two contracts is $6,700, which, if everybody chose to pay over a 20-year betterment, is about an extra $30 a month on contract two. Now, Mr. Sanjanet, I'm not sure that if your numbers with a final betterment are with 50% of the estimated cost, or if they're the total contracts combined, because I can't get those numbers to come out correctly. So is that your estimate on a final?
If you leave them separate, yes.
If
They're
you,
based
if
on
you,
what the current costs are for each project.
right, I understand that. I'm just, there is no real fair way to do this. It's not, it's inherently unfair. We've all got the letters, we've all got the emails, we've all got the phone calls, and these are not easy issues. They're complicated issues, and the only thing that any of us can do is try to do the best that we can. Is the $17,000 that you put on this spreadsheet the total cost of contract 1 and 2 divided by the total number of properties? Or is that only half?
Again, that's my best guess.
At the
It would-
total,
at the-
100% of contract 1 and 100% of contract 2 divided by the number of...
And again, it was just a guess on my part.
No, I understand that, but I'm just trying to see, because we've all heard numbers over the past year that go upwards into the $30,000, and when we started, we were talking about $20,000 betterments for everybody. I mean, the numbers have kind of fluctuated, so I want to make sure that I understand the information. So based on the cost today that we're anticipating, that would be your high number. It could be closer to the 15,000. Because it says initial estimated betterment would be under 15,000.
Yes. That's my best guess on that figure, because I'm not exactly sure how to fully calculate the 50% cost. I'd need to sit down with CDM, and I'd probably sit down with some communities that have done this to determine if I was calculating it properly. But I believe it would be below the $15,000 figure on the estimated betterment, and then I see the adjusted betterment approximately in the $17,000 range. It could be $18,000. It could be more than that. I can't give you a fair number on what those final costs are going to be on both projects.
I just want to say, for the record, that it's a very difficult thing to sit here and make a decision based on a big maybe like that, because adding a few $1,000s to a final betterment can add an inordinate amount of money to the monthly cost for the homeowners. I mean, if you take for example the difference between the $15,337 and the $17,000, that's a $1,600 difference over the life of a betterment. You're talking $6.93 a month. But every $1,000 that goes up, that tax on more money. I just, I'm all done.
Mr. Chair. Once again, I'll ask the question because I'm not quite sure I got an answer. In the past, in the precedence that's been set in Wareham, has the town, maybe I'll ask Mr. St. Jeanette, well, Mr. Gifford, you've been here longer than anybody else. Through you to Mr. Gifford. Have we ever combined contracts when determining the betterment in the town of Wareham in the past?
No.
And in your opinion, because you're probably the resident expert, why didn't you do that in the past?
We had two sewer projects, Rose Point and Briarwood Beach and Beaverham Estates. They were bid on approximately at the same time. Two different contractors got the job. And the Board of Sewer Commissioners at that time did not combine those two. They decided to go separately. And it's never happened. We've always
Never
one
happened.
contract at a time.
So when you talk about fairness, Mr. Chair, and I read Chet's letter many times, those folks in the past that have put sewer in were not given the benefit of combining their contracts. They had a project, they put the sewer in, it cost X number of dollars, they divided it up, and they paid the betterment. So when you look at, and Mr. St. Jeanette knows every time I see him, we're out trying to get more money. Trying to get more money from the state, trying to get more money from the federal government. And so, I've mentioned to some of the participants that, maybe you should sit tight on this and see what we get for additional funds. We will get more money. But once you close the book on this, I don't think you can come back to the well and say, oh, hey, you get another $1 million. So if you close Project 1, Mark, go ahead.
To Mr. Andrews, I believe you can always lower a betterment, but you can't increase the betterment.
Cannot increase it. So, I guess my point is this. If we play the fairness game and you combine, everybody enjoys the future if there's more money available. If you don't do that and you say that, Parkwood's betterment is going to be approximately, and these are approximate numbers, Mr. St. Jeanette, $15,000, right? And contract 2 is going to be $21,000. Well, 6 months from now, if we get $2 million from the federal government because they want clean water, then those folks who accepted this can't come back and say, hey, you know what, let's be fair and split the $2 million.
That's right.
That's the quandary I have. I have no issue with not separating, with not combining, because you've never done it before. Why today? Why are we going to do it today? But on the other hand, once you've closed this, and we get that money, and we will get money from the federal government, I'm sure of that. But you can't come back and reopen the case and say, well, it's not fair that you didn't give us any more of that money. So you see where I'm coming from there, Walter?
And the question I have to ask, if it is this, on the other two projects, was the total amount of both contracts gone to the state and you got the loan from the state as one contract, or was it you went to the state 2 different times? And I think maybe if you went to the state 2 different times, it's altogether different ballpark. Y'all borrowed $15 million to do a job. Now you're dividing that $15 million into 3. So now, to me, 15 into 3, and then that's $5,000 each project. Estimate. Some projects might be more or less, but to make it equitable to everybody else, we got 860 people, divide it up, 260 or 300, whatever it comes out to, and put the contracts out to the amount of people we got. Because the sewer, when you look at it, they can all stand alone. I don't care if they're side by side or different, because Parkwood at one time wasn't even in with this one. It was Oakdale, so they switched it around. Like I said, Coonamessett is way on the other side of town. What's that? Mayflower Ridge is way on the other side over there. So they're all standalone. But because someone lumped two big projects together, that's going to automatically lower the betterment. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You got 15,000, so even if it cost them, 15 million for each one, now even if they got, if you divided that 5 into 33, he'll be paying less. The guy with 260 is going to pay more. But now you got 400 and something residents on that 6 million, we'll say, because you combine it as 6 million. Contract doesn't make any difference. When you do the big contractors or small contractors, once they bid on their job, their bonding limit is set. So they can't bid on project number 2 or 3. So the big contractor is limiting them out anyway. And by the bonding power, they're always limited. It's a good idea to do it all separate because the way you bid it. But right now, it's a matter. We got to check on all avenues now. These two projects are ready now. Can you put the betterment out there? And 6 months from now, when you do contract 3, we bind them all up, or if it isn't feasible, then we'll have to. No, this is a board, so we all have to go at it as a board. But I'm just bringing this up because when they changed the figures around, it was lopsided even when Oakdale was in it. Because Oakdale had 149, and no, it was a little closer because they had 71 in Temperance North. So it was closer. But when they put Parkwood in there, because Parkwood has more than all the other combined.
Mr. Chair.
I'm just saying, to be honest, residence by residence is one way. The other contracts, they weren't done. If they were taken from the state separate, that's all together. Then you can say, hey, I have a reason. We went to the state, we borrowed $5 million for that. 6 months later, we borrowed $5 million more. They're all different. But we got all this at one time from the state. And we have to use it by a certain date, or it's going to be lost. So contract 3 needs to go out as soon as possible. Because if we don't have it out by June, it's lost.
Okay, you want to go?
Mr. Chair.
Then if we go back, times are good right now. We can get good contractor prices now because everybody's looking for jobs. If we don't do it now, and we put it out a year or 2 years from now, if we hope the economy turns around, it's going to cost us more to do contract 3 than it is right now.
And do you want to go for it?
Yes, please. Are we expected to vote on this tonight?
Yeah.
I don't think we are. We can.
This is the third, you know what, this is the third meeting that we've had that we keep putting it off. I think we should vote on
Well,
it.
I don't think it's going to hurt anybody if we put it out now, put it off, or vote on it. And I think we need to have more discussion on it because, and get more figures.
Do you,
Well,
go ahead, because I have a couple of things I want to say also, please.
First of all, the agenda says discussion, and my concern is that these numbers are very rough numbers, and making a decision on an if, maybe. I mean, you said the contract 1 is 97% complete, so we should have some pretty good numbers on contract 1 in the next month or so. Correct?
Correct.
So, what was that?
We will have.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if if we're going to have, I want the most accurate information that I can get before I make it. And this decision is going to impact hundreds of people in the community, and I think that we need to really see what these. I don't feel overly comfortable with these estimates. That's just my.
The estimates on the combined or the estimates on the other two?
Well, really, either one. I mean, they're.
Well, the betterments on leaving them separate are based on the dollars we have now.
Which are pretty accurate.
Which are very accurate.
Because we're
and
all
again-
all the contracts are still running under budget, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Significantly below budget at this point. So those numbers are fairly accurate with some estimates by CDM on the contingency cost. And those costs can only go down. They're not going to go up. Or hopefully they won't go up. Contract 1, again, that's 97% done. We're finalizing the project as we, every day they're doing the cleanup work that needs to take place at these projects, and they're doing some punch list items at the pump stations. And as Mark said, these people should be hooking up, hopefully before the end of the year, to that contract. And we'll have final numbers, very good final numbers at that point, depending on what comes in after the fact. Contract 2, we're only a third of the way done, so the cost can change, can fluctuate. It's our hope that they just go down at this point. So you won't have final good numbers like we do for Contract 1 until the summer of next year. And combining, it's based on the 50% estimated cost of the project. So you won't have fair numbers on those. They're based on the cost that CDM came up with at the very beginning of the projects.
So basically, the question is not what is the betterment, because there is no answer today. And I've been saying this for 2 months. The only question we can really answer is, do you combine or not? You cannot set a betterment today.
That's right.
The betterment will not be set until probably around May of 2012 by our estimated time frame. The only question you can answer is, do you combine or not?
Right.
That's all there is.
If I may, and I would say, and I do agree with that but I would say the Parkwood Oak Street betterment, that one would be able to be set far early, because that's another thing, when you're talking fairness, the other thing you have to be concerned is who right now is carrying the short-term interest on these loans. And it's the people who are on the system now, the people who have been there, the people who have been paying for every upgrade for every one of these. And so to try to combine them, you're going to push them off. You may run into interest with short-term interest bonds or bands that we have. If we take one out for 18 months and we're going to extend it to 30 months or 36 months or whatever while we're waiting for the final projects to be done, you're going to run into problems with that. And in that meantime, you've got a host of current sewer users that are carrying the burden of the interest on these. So, to get the first project on as soon as we can, to get the next project on, this is something that, again, looking at the fairness of everyone, this is what you do. And as far as what's going to happen down the line, I mean, the Board of Selectmen decided, technically, some people can be ticked to this. Technically, we don't have to have all of this done until 2023. Is that correct, Mark? I think 2022. It's a 20-year plan. And the reason why the board decided to go so aggressive at it were for 2 reasons. Number one is because of the impairment of the waters that we all, I think, want to do. So it's in our best interest to get as many people hooked on as quickly as possible. But also number 2 is because, as you said, Mr. Cruz, every year you put this off. If we waited 3 years for this or 4 years for this, you would be talking, in a Parkwood, if they're looking at a $15,000 betterment, you'd probably be looking at a $20,000 to $22,000 betterment. So that was why we tried to put them all together. They did overlap, and if the town was able to get out one loan rather than filling out the same paperwork with the state 3 times, I don't think that just because of that would combine it together. We do have separate projects. Each one went out to bid. And I just think that it is in the best interest of the people in this town. It is most consistent with the people, with the way that it's done in the past. That as far as to minimize the excessive burden that is on the current users now who are carrying that, I think that we keep it separate. We, as Selectman Winslow said, that it is inherently unfair. We're trying to keep it as consistently and as fair as it was, or as it is. Is that fair to everyone? No, it's not. But it is as fair, or at least it is consistent. And that, I think, is the best we can hope for in a system that really was made up way before us. And when you're looking at the final 3 projects, to change it after going through probably 70% of this, to change it then, I think is, we're just asking for trouble.
And to say that we're putting it on the burden of the sewer users who are on it now, it isn't. We already had an estimate a few months ago, 6 months or whatever it was, on all three projects combined. They were said earlier, you can go ahead and set a betterment for 1 and 2, and when 3, I'm just saying, because I'm just going to put this to sleep, because when 3 comes up, we can change it, as long as we don't go higher, right? If you set it now, suppose you set everybody at 20 now, and then when we do contract 3, you find out it's 17, then it drops down. So the people just,
That's right, you can
Right.
load a betterment, but you can't increase.
But,
right.
but when you say that no one's carrying the burden right now,
You're saying set the betterment now so Parkwood and Linwood and all that can start paying their betterment now so it'll ease it up. They can still stop paying it now. There
So-
isn't anything stopping us from.
so you want to put a $29,000 betterment on
We're not saying
people's-
29,000.
You just said 29,000.
No, I didn't.
And then you said it
I
could be
didn't say
lowered down to
anything.
17.
I said 20.
And then you said it could be lowered to 17.
And then we don't know. We have to, the same estimate that they figured all contracts, they can give us the same estimate. When we had at the town hall, they gave us a price of all three combined, how much it would be. It's an estimate. Everything, even this is an estimate. Parkwood is going to be finished in October,
Walter,
so they
Chair.
should. Yes,
you're talking about Project 3.
right.
There isn't a word on this document that says anything about
No,
Project
no,
3.
it isn't. It isn't. You're absolutely correct.
Right.
And we're here for these two, right?
Well,
Right.
that's what it says on the document, but it sounds to me, maybe I'm hearing you wrong, that you had the opinion that we should include all three projects, split it up over the 800 users, and that's the number. Is that right?
But I think it should be fair. We got the loan on 3. Now, this is put up because someone said, put up with these 2. The first time we got estimates, we got on all 3.
Right.
1, 2, and then all 3.
Right.
So now we got this with only 1 and 2. So why didn't we have it with all 3?
Because contract 3 hasn't been bid yet.
Right, but you have
the
an estimate.
I have poorer estimates than what I used to combine contract 1 and 2. Okay, and if I can just try and explain one thing, the board does not set the betterment. The cost of the project sets the betterment. All the board needs to do is determine, are you going to leave the contract 1 and 2 separate or combine them?
Right.
I think that's what the board has to decide on. And again, the betterment numbers are simply, I'll say estimates of what the current costs for these projects are.
We've been going by estimates since the project began. So until the project is finally finished, it's this. You've been in the business, we all been in the business, you're going by estimates. So even if we do a betterment now, it's going to be estimate.
You can't do a
We're not
betterment
doing
now.
a betterment
No,
now.
I estimated betterment. Because right now you're saying 15 and 17.
If you combine,
The closest
if you
one that
combine
we
the
have-
projects, it would be based on 50%
Right.
of the cost of the project for contracts 1 and 2. Okay?
I think right now that we don't need to vote on it tonight. And that's my opinion. I think we should, but it's up to the board. So,
Is
well,
this document, were you going to bang that gavel?
well, I was going to say, it's not
Well,
citizen
if we go back-
participation. It's a discussion we're having between the board members. And most of the people here are from Parkwood and Linwood, which would benefit more than somebody from...
It's an open meeting.
Adwell.
People from Oakdale could have come, or Cremisa, so
No,
it is an
anybody
open
think
can
meeting.
come.
I
That
had
doesn't
the
mean
floor.
as a town,
Can I have my floor back for a
yes,
second,
as a
please?
town
Sorry,
selectman, that we don't
Selectman
look at,
Holmes.
we don't look at...
When I go back to,
everyone.
when I go back to the original, and I just found that sitting there, when we first did that report, prior to the Saturday meeting, Project 1 seems to stay about the same at 15, Project 2 goes to 22, and Project 3 although it's not bid, Mr. Sanjanet, represents conservative estimates, right? You're smiling too, yeah. But then, as I look on the, and that was 37, by the way, right? Now, if I go to the other page, where it says that contract 1, 2, and 3, if you combined all three together, the betterment would be, and I'm going to say estimated, at $20,613.
Mr. Holmes,
Yes?
I don't think that we should talk about contract 3 because
Well,
it's
no,
not
we
bid.
are talking about
Well,
contract.
well, we are, but
The chairman is suggesting that because we took a loan on 3 projects, that his discussion about fairness has led to 800 and something users over 3 projects divided by the number equals the betterment. So he did bring contract 3 into this. He's not talking about contract 1 and 2, he's talking about all 3.
Okay.
And so therefore, I knew we had a report somewhere. He just asked the
Yeah.
question, why is 3 not in this? Because somebody made a motion one day and said, keep 3 out. I remember that the night of this meeting. But this is the report that Mr. Sanjanet provided that said that if you combine all 3 together, the betterment would be approximately $20,613.
Right.
Now, if you left it separate, the people that are involved in contract 3 are going to be looking at somewhere in the vicinity of $37,000.
And every year that we wait to bid that out, the percentage, it goes up, because it's extremely expensive, and I understand that, but I think for the purposes of fairness to the people, contract 3 may not be bid for years. I mean, we're talking about it, we have, the money for it, the loan for it, but as I think somebody, it might have been Mrs. Ekstrom said the last time, it could be 10 years before we bid and complete that project. So, I mean, there's no guarantee that is going to get done in the near future. So,
Contract 3 needs to go out before June. It has to be out before, with the loan that we took out for all 3 projects, it has to go out.
if we're going to use that
And
money,
if we have an
and-
estimated, I'm glad you found that right in front of me. Look at that.
Well, I knew I had.
And we know it's 20,000, so we got 860 people. We said it from the beginning, there's going to be some happy and some unhappy people. But at least we got the contract and we're splitting it up between 860 people. And if it comes out lower, then they can lower the betterment. But right now, if they want a betterment right now, it's 20 or 21,000, they'll pay that.
But-
And then when
Well-
when we get all 3
But
contracts,
if I may, but the issue is that you cannot legitimately charge someone for a betterment if it does not better their property. You cannot charge someone in Parkwood for efforts that we're doing over in Agawam when we're going to dig underneath the water to connect the sewer pipes over there. You can't give someone a betterment. And by the numbers that Mr. Holmes is reading, is that, and we'll use Parkwood, but Parkwood, that we're 15,000 and change right now. If we combine them, we'll only charge them another $2,000 more. If we combine them with all 3, we'll only charge them $5,000 more. I will tell you right now, whether it is Parkwood, whether it is one of the other areas that did not get combined or whatever, you will have people bringing us to court to say to the courts, prove to us where this $5,000 betted my property, and we will lose. And you guys can get nervous that I have said that. I've said it publicly once before, because I will tell you, there were residents in other areas that, not in Parkwood or Oakdale or Cremisa, people who already have their betterments, who have said to me, if these things happen, there will be lawsuits by us because you didn't do it for us.
the question I asked Mark was the loans taken out separate. If the loans was taken out separate, they were all done proper. This loan was taken out as for 3 contracts, and it's going to be done well, I'm not saying it's
Well,
going to be done.
if I
but
remember.
It should be done. And you're saying about going underwater, if you know underwater is going to be the most expensive to
It's-
go, most costly, why are you going to put it on
No,
106 people when you could
No,
have combined
Mr.
it with a
Miss-
couple others?
Excuse me, Mr. Cruz. First of all,
Madam, or Chair, person, I have the floor and I haven't speak.
Okay.
So, but I'm saying, if you know it's going under the river, it's going to cost more, you could have combined it with a couple other projects. It's the engineers can do anything they want. It's a standalone project, all of them sewers, because the sewer, we got main lines going from here all the way to Coonamessett. Where we're going to Mayflower Ridge, we can tie in. So,
And if I'm,
the sewer.
I would say, if I may just, because of the one point about this, about going under the water. Actually, you were on the board with me when we voted to go under the water because we were going to save those people approximately $800,000 rather than going up Great Neck. So it certainly wasn't because it was more expensive that we went underwater. We did that trying to find the cheaper ways to get up there. And it was an $800,000 lower in the estimate of that project if we went under the water rather than going up. And you were on the board when we did that.
That was a good thing to save 800,000, but because you save 800,000, you're going to put the blunt of that on 106 people when everybody else has 450 to divide and the other one has 150, and you only got 106 paying the same. Well, it says 37,000.
Well, and if also, let me just say that 37,000, we could not qualify for stimulus money for that project, if I'm not mistaken. The other two, they could combine them in the eyes of the state, so we could actually get a higher stimulus rate than we could. We could not do that one, I think, because it hadn't been out to bid. But there is other rounds of stimulus. We can try to get other money for them. The 37,000 is the high-end ballpark figure, and if I remember correctly, the project one, it's, I don't know, like a $6.2 million, the bid was a 6.3, and the initial estimate from CDM on that project was somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 8.5 million. And so, because of the economy, as Ms. Winslow alluded to, because of the economy, these bids are coming in a lot lower. So if you've got a $5 million project is what CDM is estimating this to be, which would be the 37,000, that project could come in at $4 million. And if it comes in at $4 million, what did you say, 140? Divided by 140.
There's no stimulus money.
You know, you're
applied
talking,
to
it drops it down to 28,000.
Zero.
And that is in the
Okay,
neighborhood
we
of what
only
we've been
have
doing it before.
150 people.
Well, I did it at 140, so it's going to drop even more than that. So I think that, number one, we are going to face a lot of issues if we are expecting one group of people in one area, we are expecting them to pay a portion of somebody else's thing. It's Emerson College versus the City of Boston, and there is a strict guideline as to what you're allowed to charge for a betterment. And you have to prove that it is in a direct correlation with the property actually being bettered. You can't just randomly pick a number and charge them.
So are you suggesting that people that we've charged betterments to check their property values to see if they were bettered by that number? And
No.
if they weren't,
No,
then
no, no.
those betterments should be reduced?
No, no, no. Are you saying that, I'm sorry.
If you're saying that you have to prove, if you charge me a betterment of $15,000, you have to prove that you improved my property by $15,000.
Well, that the value of your, I mean, not the assessed value. Because, I mean, someone had asked that in the thing the other day as far as once we put a $15,000 betterment on, are we going to go out and assess their value, their property at
Right.
$15,000 more? No, we don't do that. What happens is that over time, in your area, where you could only sell your house before for, say, $250,000, and an unsewered house would be, say, $250,000, with sewer, you can sell it for $265,000 or $270,000. That average over time is the betterment of your house. And there is a quantitative, but if we can say, yeah, this project cost this much to do these number of houses, divided it up, the courts have said, yeah, that's a legitimate charge because that's where you're doing it. But if you say, well, we divide up this way, and then we take this neighborhood over here, and we're going to combine them and then charge it, the courts have ruled that that is not a legitimate way, I mean, that is not a legitimate charge, because you're charging these people for something that they have no value in, that they have nothing to do with.
Could you also make the argument that we're all citizens of Wareham? Every brochure, everything that Mark has been putting out for summer 2010 has pictures of our water in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know what, if those rivers were polluted, those people couldn't rent their houses out to people in the summer. They wouldn't get any rentals. The place would be falling apart. So is there a place for an argument that says, okay, Wareham, here's what we're going to do? I think Chet alluded to this a little earlier. You know what? It's $18,000. Everybody who's getting sewer pays $18,000. If it cost us more to finish it, we spread it. Is there an argument for that? Everybody betters. Property value's better if the water's clean. The town betters if the water's clean. It keeps tourists coming in. It keeps tax revenue coming in.
But I think
If you have polluted rivers, who's going to want to come here?
I think if you use that argument, I think that goes to the argument to dissolve the entire sewer enterprise fund.
Wow.
And then, you know what, put it as a tax to the entire community, because, and I've said this plenty of times, from the time 1995, flushing my toilet at my home, 2005, after the new plant, flushing my toilet at home, it flushes the same way. It doesn't, there was no improvement that I saw, no particular benefit that I saw, and yet I am one of those sewer users that are paying part of that $24 million upgrade.
Did you get a betterment? Do you feel you got a betterment in your home?
Well, not for the upgrade, not for the sewer upgrade, absolutely not. And as far as the betterments, yeah, I mean, I think that if that had been the approach that they took in 2002, I think it could have been a very viable approach. However, we all know that the sewer users, even when every sewer user is online, I think it's only going to account for like 30 or 35% of the entire town. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, in direct representative government, you know, most government you have majority rule with minority protection. Unfortunately, you don't have that here. And that if, you know, enough non-sewer users go to town meeting and vote to have an enterprise fund to take out loans to let this one section of the population pay it back, unfortunately, that's what we do. And through the enterprise fund system, you know, from the accounting system from the DOR, allowable under the law, that is, again, going back to what Ms. Winslow said, it is an inherently unfair system. So you just try to keep it as fair or as consistent as it has been.
And going back to the property owners, they had to either be sewered or some of their septics had to be redone. And if they had to redo their septic, it's going to cost $15,000 to $17,000. So when they paid us a betterment, you can look at it that way. It's a new sewer system, which it is, that they have. Because a lot of them, before they sell the house, they have to go to do a Title V, which is going to cost them $15,000 to $17,000.
With this?
So now, the house is worth more. We're not going by that. We're just going by individual. But the vote on it for tonight, I'm saying we don't. We have 5 more minutes. I'm making a recommendation that at 10 o'clock we cease and continue it to another.
Could we, you know, if this is what we're going to do, could we make a date certain, and I would even say so much as a time certain, on a date certain, that we will actually take a vote? As I said, this is the 3rd or 4th time that it's been on the agenda. And every time we say, oh, it says discussion, we're not going to discuss it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that the established way it is that we keep them separate. We always have. So unless anyone wants to make a motion to change it, as far as I'm concerned, they should be separate.
Well, we just discussed several different ways that may be options. I mean, do we look at it now and say it's 2010, it's time to change the ways? I mean, I know I wouldn't feel too good sitting home right now, living in Rose Point, saying, no, I paid $20,000. They didn't give a rip what the other people paid. I paid my share, and that's the end of it. You know, some of these people feel the same way. They don't give a rip about what Cremisitz's going to pay. They're saying, I live here. This is what it costs. This is how many people lived here. This is what I'm paying. And you know what? And if you took a vote of those local residents, Walter, they're not going to favor yours because these people that have already gotten these documents at $15,000, they don't want to pay 17. They don't want to pay 20.
Or 20.
There's a set already. Who's ever in is in. It's just
No, I'm
these-
talking about this
these
document
three,
right here in the
right.
report that Mr. Sanjanet put out, this report.
On this one, the only one who's
If
going
it
to be
says-
happy.
Excuse me, I still have the floor. If it said 15,000 here, don't come back to me today and say 16. You could say estimate until you were blue in the face, and you know how that works. But if this thing turns out to be 16, those same people are going to be screaming at you. These are estimates. And quite frankly, I don't think they should have been put out. I complained about that when they scheduled that July 31st meeting, that there's no way in heck that you're going to get a number. There's no way. So what do? Put it back on this agenda. What do? Put it on another agenda. You don't have the answers, but you want us to make a decision.
We
That-
need to
that's
find out.
That's my problem.
We need
That's
to
what
find
I
out
said
figures.
a half hour ago, is that we don't have enough of the accurate information to make an informed decision. And I don't want to look back a year from now and say, boy, that was a dumb decision I made because I didn't know.
But I think that if you know, whether a betterment is 15.3 or 15.7, or combine them, they're going to be 18.2 or 17.8. That is the semantics of the argument. And if you're going to get like Machiavellian of, well, I think that we can squeeze Parkwood people to pay an extra $1,200 and they won't complain, but $1,500 they'll complain. So we better not do that. That I think is even more dangerous. I think that the decision has to be made. It's a moral, decisive decision on, do we have everyone pay what is going in front of their house and what we are being charged to put in front of their house, or do we make the decision and have one group of the community pay to underwrite or supplement other parts of the community? To me, that's the question. And as far as, I don't really care. I mean, I hate to say it. I don't really care what the betterments are. Sorry, people. I don't. But it doesn't matter to me whether it's going to be 15,000 and 22,000 or 17,000, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant because the argument or the decision has to be one that can stand up that you can stand up on your own merits and not say, well, because it was only this much, I thought it was okay. My opinion is that you need to stand up and you need to have a reason and opinion and an understanding as to why it should be one way rather than letting the dollars and cents guide it. That's just my opinion.
Well, let me just throw. Well, I'll say two things because we have 2 minutes before it's 10 o'clock. The first is that one of the individuals that called me said, you know, in the old days we did it by the frontage, and people got upset because people who had corner lots or people who had frontage, well, in the back that was considered front. Okay, so I understand that. He said some people, like myself, sit on a double lot. So if you divide the betterment by lots, and I'm not suggesting I agree with this, but if you divide the betterment by lots, then people whose homes who sit on the double or triple lots are going to pay 2 or 3 times more. Wouldn't that be more fair? And I thought, well, yeah, except my house sits on a double lot, and that was a contractor error, so, you know, I shouldn't be charged double, and you'll get that argument from people. But I guess that conversely, while we're looking at these numbers, and this is one of the things that is really troubling to me, is if Mr. Sanjanet says that this $21,000 number can only go down, it's entirely possible that that number can go much lower and that the betterments all around could be lower for everybody involved in the project, correct? If the numbers can't go up from this, if we're hoping they're all going to go down, and we're just waiting on the contingency numbers from CDM that we hope don't go up, we're thinking are going to go down, I mean, I guess this is, this is my concern. My concern is that the information is just not that accurate. And I'll also say that I don't, because contract 3 is not bid, I don't think that that should be part of this discussion. I mean, I don't think that that's fair. I don't like the $37,000 number myself, but it's not bid yet, and to keep these folks, hanging on, for many months, the bid process itself can take a month or two. So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents. And
Well, it's going to be up until May, according to the conversation we had before the betterments go up, right?
Well, we'll
That's
have
on
the final figures for contract 1
After October, because
sometime
October's,
in October, yeah.
yeah, because end of October is the contract finish date.
That'll be final.
Right.
So we would be able to set the betterment for contract 1 before the first of the year.
If we can make a decision.
In fact, if that was going to, but you'd be able to assess the betterment, so going on the tax rate for next year.
But, a mistake has been made, or oversight has been made, because when they put Parkwood with the other 2 or 3 units, that gave them an unfair advantage. If you were looking at it, everybody should have been. It is, because you got 450 people paying a betterment.
The cost to do a construction project.
Right, it's divided.
Number 3 isn't, it's not even bid yet. I will tell you right now, we will have a lawyer in here, because you don't even have a contractor.
All right.
Sorry, sir,
Time out.
Mr. Chair, motion to go beyond the hour 10 for a minimal amount of time.
Second.
a minimum is what? Because I think we need a...
I'll say
We're
no.
not going to vote on this, we just need to put it off to a...
Well, I mean, we have other business as well, so.
There's other business on the agenda that we absolutely have to address tonight, so.
I've seconded the motion. Just
what?
to
Go beyond the hour 10.
I think we table this and have the other chairman come in.
Second?
and-
She
Are you
seconded.
waiting for a second?
We're
No.
waiting for him to call for a vote.
Oh.
She
I thought I
seconded.
heard you
So
say
was
second.
somebody,
I did say second. I said seconded Kara's motion.
X10, if, Tim,
Well-
are you going to put a limit on it or not?
10:30, no later than 10:30.
This is,
Karen made the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Who seconded
I seconded it.
Brenda?
it? Brenda second.
This was a different motion than I seconded.
All in favor? Say
Aye.
All opposed?
Wait on next year.
So, Mr. Chairman, let me be clear on my question. What are you asking us to vote on? You're asking us to vote the question whether or not we combine contracts 1 and 2 or not. Is that the simple question?
I'm
here?
not asking for, as a chairman, I can't ask for motion, but I'm
I
suggesting...
know,
Right.
I know.
You can ask for one, you can't make
I
one.
can-
You can't make one, but
I'm saying
what's the
we don't
question
vote
you
on-
want answered is what I'm trying to...
What we need answered. I'm saying that we don't do anything on this right now until we get the final figures.
Well, the question isn't about the betterment. The question is about combining contracts. That's what I'm trying to get to. We've
Absolutely.
had nice discussion. I enjoy that part. But the question is not what the betterment is, right? Is that what you guys are looking for? What the...
They want
I'm
no
sorry,
paper
I'm
back.
addressing Mr. Sanjanet, please. John, is that what you're asking for? Is are we going to combine these contracts?
Yes.
That's the
Or leave them
question.
separate. Yes, that's the question that
That's the
needs to be
question.
answered.
Not about what the betterment's going to be. It's about, are we going to combine the contracts or not? That's the question.
Well, in the application of the stimulus money is part of that.
Well, I think we just need to answer one question, and then we can put off the other questions, because, maybe based on that decision, stimulus money goes a different way.
Right, it'll answer its own
So I think the
will be
question
answered
is,
once
do we
decide.
combine or not combine? That's the question.
And I say that if no one makes a motion and a vote doesn't carry in any way, then they are separate. Because that is the precedent, that is how it has always been done. And that unless there's an
Tips.
affirmative to change it, I believe that,
You're talking about combining contracts now. Forget
Right.
stimulus money.
right, just to
Forget that.
combine the contracts.
Because we could decide to say 0, 100. We could decide to say 30, 70. We could decide to say whatever.
Right.
But that's not the question today.
Right.
The question today is, do you combine
Do you combine them?
contract 1 and 2 or not?
Right.
Yes?
Either you leave them separate or you combine them.
Correct. I make a motion that we do not combine the contracts.
Well, then I don't think we even need a motion then. I think you need a motion to combine them.
A motion's been made, is there a second?
Well, yes, second.
And you said motion to
Not, yeah, just leave it separate.
separate.
See what happens with that.
Motion's been made, to keep a second by Steve. Second.
Second by me.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Full vote. Steve, Brenda,
Kara.
okay.
yeah, that's fine.
So,
3,
3,
I'm against it.
1, 0. Okay.
And one abstain.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also make a motion that we table any further discussion on this project to a
Second.
later date.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.